The letter arrived at Samuel Rayburn's ranch on a Tuesday morning in late September of 1878, the envelope worn from its journey across half the country. And when he read the careful words written in elegant script, he felt something shift in his chest, a mixture of hope and terror that made his calloused hands tremble. He had placed the advertisement 6 weeks earlier, a simple notice in a Boston newspaper seeking a woman willing to travel west to become his wife. Samuel was 27 years old, owner of a modest but thriving cattle ranch just outside Montezuma, Colorado, and he had spent the last 3 years building something worth sharing with another person. The loneliness had become unbearable during the long winter nights, the silence of the empty house pressing against him like a physical weight. His neighbors had suggested he find a bride through correspondence, and after much deliberation, he had finally gathered the courage to try. The woman who responded called herself Willa Preston, though she wrote that most people called her Willa. She was 24 years old, educated at a finishing school in Massachusetts, and currently working as a seamstress in a textile factory. Her letter was polite, cautious, revealing little about her circumstances beyond the basic facts. She asked practical questions about the ranch, about the climate in Colorado, about what he expected from a wife. There was no poetry in her words, no romantic declarations, only a quiet desperation that Samuel recognized because he felt it himself. They exchanged 4 more letters over the following weeks, each one slightly warmer than the last. Willa admitted she had no family left in Boston, that she was eager for a fresh start somewhere far from the crowded, smoke-filled city. Samuel described his ranch, the mountains visible from the front porch, the creek that ran through the property, the herd of cattle he had built from nothing. He told her about the town of Montezuma, small but respectable, with a church and a general store and decent people who helped their neighbors. He did not tell her about the loneliness, about the way he sometimes caught himself talking to his horse just to hear a voice. He figured she would understand that part without him saying it. In her final letter before agreeing to come, Willa wrote something that stayed with Samuel long after he finished reading. She said she had been through difficult times, that she carried scars from her past, and she wanted to be honest about that before she made the journey. She did not elaborate, and Samuel did not press for details. Everyone had scars of some kind, he reasoned. What mattered was the future they could build together. The day Willa was scheduled to arrive, Samuel rode into Montezuma before dawn, his best shirt pressed and his hair freshly cut by his own inexpert hand. The stagecoach was not due until late morning, which gave him 3 hours to pace nervously outside the general store while trying to appear calm. Martha Green, who ran the store with her husband, took pity on him and brought him coffee, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Never seen you so worked up, Sam," she said, patting his arm. "I am sure she will be lovely." "What if she takes one look at me and gets right back on that stage?" Samuel asked, voicing the fear that had kept him awake all night. Martha laughed, a warm sound that eased some of his anxiety. "Then she would be a fool, and you would be better off without her. But I do not think that will happen. Any woman brave enough to travel all this way alone is not going to turn tail at the sight of a good man." The stagecoach arrived at 11:30, dust billowing around the wheels as it pulled to a stop in front of the hotel. Samuel stood frozen as the driver climbed down and opened the door, assisting 2 passengers out. The first was an elderly man who immediately hobbled toward the saloon. The second was a woman in a dark blue traveling dress, a worn carpetbag clutched in her gloved hands. Willa Preston was not beautiful in the conventional sense. Her face was too angular, her mouth too wide, her dark hair pulled back so severely it looked painful. but her eyes, when they met his across the dusty street, were extraordinary. They were the color of amber, warm and intelligent and cautious all at once. She stood very straight, her shoulders back despite what must have been exhausting travel, and Samuel felt that shift in his chest again, stronger this time. He walked toward her, removing his hat. "Miss Preston, Mr. Rayburn." Her voice was lower than he expected, slightly hoarse. She did not smile, but something in her expression softened. "I am glad to finally meet you." "The pleasure is mine, madam." Samuel gestured toward his wagon, hitched nearby. "I thought we could get the license at the courthouse here in town if you are still willing. Reverend Peters can marry us right after. Unless you want to wait, get settled first." Willa shook her head. "I did not come all this way to wait. If you are certain, then I am ready." The wedding was brief, conducted in the small courthouse with Martha and her husband serving as witnesses. Willa's hands were steady as she signed the marriage certificate, her signature bold and clear. Samuel's hand shook slightly, leaving a small blot of ink next to his name. Reverend Peters, a kind man in his 60s who had known Samuel since he first arrived in Montezuma, spoke the traditional words with genuine warmth, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, he smiled at them both. "You may kiss your bride, Sam." Samuel looked at Willa, seeing the nervousness in her eyes despite her composed expression. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Welcome to Colorado, Mrs. Rayburn." The ride to the ranch took an hour, the wagon rattling over the rough mountain road. Willa sat beside Samuel on the bench, her carpetbag at her feet, her eyes taking in the landscape with what seemed like wonder. The aspens were turning gold, brilliant against the dark green of the pine forests, and the peaks of the mountains were already dusted with early snow. "It is beautiful," Willa said quietly, "different from anything I have ever seen." "Wait until winter," Samuel said. "It gets cold here, colder than Boston, I would wager. But there is something about it, especially when the snow is fresh. Makes everything quiet and clean." "I like quiet," Willa said. "I have had enough of noise to last a lifetime." The ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise, a sturdy log structure with a wide front porch and a stone chimney. It was not large, just 3 rooms and a loft, but Samuel had built it himself with help from his neighbors, and he was proud of it. A barn stood nearby, along with a chicken coop and a corral where his horses watched their approach with mild interest. Samuel helped Willa down from the wagon, noticing how she winced slightly as her feet hit the ground. "You must be exhausted. The stagecoach ride from Denver is not easy." "I have endured worse," Willa said, then seemed to catch herself. "But yes, I am tired. Thank you." He carried her bag inside, showing her the main room with its fireplace and simple furniture, the kitchen area with its iron stove, the bedroom with the bed he had built from pine logs. "I can sleep in the loft," Samuel said quickly, seeing her face. "Until you are comfortable, I do not expect anything just because we sign papers." Willa turned to look at him, those amber eyes searching his face. "You are very kind, Mr. Rayburn. Samuel, please, just Samuel. Samuel." She said his name carefully, as if testing it. "And you must call me Willa." They spent the rest of the day in careful politeness, each navigating around the other in the small space. Willa unpacked her few belongings while Samuel tended to the animals, giving her privacy. When he returned to the house, he found her in the kitchen, examining the supplies in his pantry with a critical eye. "I am not much of a cook," Samuel admitted. "Mostly I make stew and beans and biscuits that could break teeth." "I can cook," Willa said. "Not fancy things, but good, solid food. If you show me where the root cellar is, I can make us something for supper." They ate venison stew with fresh bread that Willa somehow produced from his meager supplies, the food better than anything Samuel had tasted in months. They talked about simple things over the meal: the journey from Boston, the ranch's daily routines, the neighbors who lived scattered throughout the valley. Willa asked intelligent questions about the cattle, about the market in Denver, about how he managed the ranch mostly alone. "I hire help during roundup and branding," Samuel explained. "And my neighbor Tom Wheeler comes by when I need an extra hand with something, but mostly it is just me." "And now me," Willa said softly. "And now you," Samuel agreed, feeling the weight of that reality settling over them both. As night fell, Samuel prepared to climb the ladder to the loft, giving Willa the bedroom as promised, but she stopped him with a quiet word. "Samuel, wait." She stood by the bedroom door, her expression uncertain. "I want to be a proper wife to you. I know we are strangers, but I came here intending to build a real marriage. If you are willing to be patient with me, I would like to start tonight." Samuel's heart hammered against his ribs. "Willa, there is no rush. I meant what I said. We can take our time." "I know." She twisted her hands together, a crack in her composed facade. "But I would rather not spend weeks being afraid. I would rather just start." He crossed the room slowly, stopping a few feet away from her. "I will never hurt you. I need you to know that." Something flickered in her eyes, pain or memory or both. "I believe you." They entered the bedroom together, and Willa lit the oil lamp on the dresser, casting soft light across the simple space. She stood with her back to him, her hands reaching for the buttons of her dress, and Samuel saw them shaking. "Let me help," he said gently, moving behind her. She tensed as his fingers touched the top button, but she did not pull away. Samuel worked slowly, carefully, unfastening each button with deliberate gentleness. As the dress loosened and began to slide from her shoulders, he saw the edge of her chemise, and then below it something else. Marks, lines that crisscrossed her back, pale against her skin, scars. Samuel's breath caught. There were dozens of them, some thin as thread, others wider, all forming a terrible map across her skin. He understood immediately what they were, the pattern unmistakable. Someone had beaten her repeatedly with something that cut, a whip or a strap or a belt. Willa stood perfectly still, barely breathing, waiting for his reaction. Samuel raised his hand slowly, giving her time to stop him, and gently traced one of the scars with his fingertip, following its path from her shoulder blade toward her spine. "Who did this to you?" "My father." Her voice was barely a whisper. He was a religious man, or he thought he was. He believed suffering purified the soul, that pain brought one closer to God. "When my mother died, he became worse. Every small infraction, every moment of independence he punished. The last time I fought back. I hit him with a candlestick and ran. I was 17. I have been on my own since then." Samuel traced another scar, then another, his touch feather light. "How old are you now?" 24. 7 years I have been working in that factory, saving every penny I could, trying to build something. But Boston, it swallows people. I was disappearing there, becoming invisible. When I saw your advertisement, I thought perhaps I could find something different, a life that was actually mine." Samuel leaned forward and pressed his lips to one of the scars, a kiss so gentle it was almost not there. "You are beautiful still." Willa made a sound, half sob, half gasp, and turned to face him. Tears streamed down her face, but she was not trying to hide them. "I thought you would be disgusted. I thought you would send me back." "Never." Samuel cupped her face in his hands, wiping away the tears with his thumbs. "You survived something terrible, Willa. These scars do not make you less. They are proof of your strength, your will to keep living when someone tried to break you. They are part of you, and you are beautiful, all of you." She kissed him then, fierce and desperate and full of 7 years of loneliness. Samuel responded with equal intensity, pulling her close, careful of her back but holding her as if she was precious, as if she was exactly what he had been waiting for all along. They made love that night with a tenderness that surprised them both, each touch a question and an answer, each kiss a promise. Samuel was patient and careful, paying attention to every response, every sigh, every moment of tension that needed to ease. Willa clung to him like he was solid ground in a storm, and afterward she cried against his chest while he held her and stroked her hair and told her she was safe. She was home. She was wanted. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Samuel taught Willa about the ranch, showing her how to tend the chickens, how to milk the cow, how to recognize when the horses needed attention. She learned quickly, her hands becoming capable with the work, her initial city-bred awkwardness transforming into something more confident. In turn, she transformed the house, bringing order to Samuel's bachelor chaos, sewing curtains for the windows, planting herbs in pots on the porch before the frost came. They talked while they worked, sharing stories of their lives before this. Samuel told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about how he had come west after his parents died, seeking something he could not quite name. Willa described her childhood, the happy years before her mother's death, and then the darker times after. She spoke of the factory, the endless hours at the sewing machines, the women who worked beside her, all of them trapped in different ways. "Why did you wait so long to answer an advertisement?" Samuel asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains orange and purple. Willa was quiet for a moment, her hand resting on his. "Fear, mostly. I worried I would escape one prison only to find myself in another. Men who seek mail-order brides, some of them are good like you, but others, they want servants or worse. I had to save enough money that if things went wrong, I could leave again, start over somewhere else. It took 7 years to save $60. You brought $60 with you." Samuel turned to stare at her. "Hidden in the lining of my carpet bag, my escape fund in case you turned out to be cruel." She met his eyes. "I do not think I will need it now." "Keep it," Samuel said firmly. "That money is yours, Willa, your security. I never want you to feel trapped here." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I do not feel trapped. For the first time in my life, I feel free." October arrived with cold winds and early snows that melted by midday. Samuel took Willa into Montezuma to introduce her properly to the townspeople, and she charmed them with her quiet intelligence and dry sense of humor. Martha Green took an immediate liking to her, and soon Willa was joining the other ranch wives for their weekly gathering, a social circle Samuel had not even known she might want. "They are good women," Willa told him after her first meeting. "A few of them came west as brides too. We understand each other in ways that do not need explaining." Life settled into something comfortable, but comfortable did not mean complacent. Samuel found himself falling in love with his wife, truly and deeply in love, not just gratitude or companionship, but something that made his chest ache when he looked at her. The way she sang while she cooked, old hymns in a clear, sweet voice. The way she laughed at his jokes, a sound that came more easily as the weeks passed. The way she fit against him at night, her scarred back pressed to his chest, his arm around her waist, both of them breathing in synchrony. Willa seemed to feel it too. Samuel could see it in the way she watched him when she thought he was not looking, a softness in her amber eyes that had not been there at first. She touched him more often, casual touches as they passed each other in the house, her hand on his arm, his fingers brushing her waist. When they made love, it was no longer tentative but joyful, playful even, both of them learning what pleased the other, building intimacy layer by layer. In early November, A early blizzard struck the valley without warning, trapping them in the house for 3 days. Samuel worried about the cattle, but there was nothing he could do until the storm passed. Instead, they stayed inside, keeping the fire high, playing cards and reading aloud from the few books Samuel owned. Willa proved to be fiercely competitive at poker, winning most of their hands with a perfectly straight face that made Samuel laugh. "You are cheating somehow," he accused after she won the 7th game in a row. "I am not," she said, gathering the matchsticks they were using as chips. "You are just terrible at bluffing. Every time you have a good hand, your left eyebrow twitches." Samuel touched his eyebrow. "It does not. It absolutely does." Willa grinned at him, and Samuel's heart turned over at the sight. He had not seen her smile like that before, unguarded and genuinely happy. He stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her. "I love you, Willa Rayburn." She went very still, her eyes searching his face. "You do not have to say that. I am not saying it because I have to. I am saying it because it is true. I love you. I love your strength and your intelligence and your terrible sense of humor. I love the way you sing and the way you beat me at cards. I love waking up next to you and working beside you and falling asleep with you in my arms. I love you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I did not think I would, not really. I thought perhaps we would be friendly, build something practical. But Samuel, I love you so much it frightens me sometimes." He kissed her then, tasting salt and joy, and they made love on the rug in front of the fireplace, the storm raging outside while they created their own warmth within. When the snow finally stopped, Samuel spent 2 days checking on the herd, relieved to find they had weathered the storm better than he feared. He lost 3 head to the cold, which was unfortunate but not disastrous. Willa helped him skin the carcasses for the hides and butcher the meat, working without complaint despite the grim nature of the task. "I have gutted fish at the market," she said when Samuel tried to excuse her from helping. "This is not so different, just larger." December brought Christmas, their first together as a married couple. Samuel cut a small pine tree and brought it into the house, and Willa made decorations from scraps of fabric and bits of ribbon. They attended the Christmas service at the church in Montezuma, Willa's hand tucked in Samuel's arm, both of them singing carols with the rest of the congregation. On Christmas morning, Samuel gave Willa a music box he had ordered from Denver, a beautiful thing made of cherry wood that played a waltz when wound. She cried when she opened it, admitting she had dreamed of having a music box as a child, but her father considered such things frivolous. Willa gave Samuel a shirt she had sewn in secret, the stitching so fine it looked machine-made. But more than that, she gave him a letter, written in her elegant script, telling him everything she had been too afraid to say aloud. How he had saved her not just from Boston, but from believing she was worthless. How he had shown her that love could be gentle and good. How she thanked God every day for the courage to answer his advertisement. Samuel held her while she cried, and he cried too, both of them overwhelmed by the weight of what they had found in each other. Winter deepened, and the work of the ranch continued despite the cold. Samuel taught Willa to ride, patiently guiding her through the basics until she could manage his gentlest horse with reasonable confidence. She proved to be a natural, her city upbringing notwithstanding, and soon she was riding out with him to check on the cattle, bundled in layers of wool and fur. One afternoon in late January, they were riding back to the house when Willa suddenly reined in her horse, staring at something in the distance. Samuel followed her gaze and saw smoke rising from beyond the ridge to the east, too much smoke to be a campfire. "That is coming from the Wheeler place," Samuel said, fear spiking through him. Tom Wheeler and his wife had 3 young children. They rode hard toward the smoke, arriving to find the Wheelers' barn fully engulfed in flames. Tom was outside with buckets, trying desperately to keep the fire from spreading to the house, while his wife Sarah herded the children to safety. Samuel and Willa dismounted and immediately joined the fight. For an hour they worked frantically, hauling water from the well, dousing the sides of the house and the nearby woodpile, slowly beating back the flames. The barn was lost, but they managed to save everything else. When the fire finally died down to smoldering embers, they all collapsed in the snow, exhausted and covered in soot. Tom's face was streaked with tears. "All the hay," he said hoarsely. "All our winter feed for the horses and the cow. I do not know what we are going to do." "You are going to come stay with us for a few days while you figure it out," Samuel said firmly, "and we will share our hay. We have enough to get both our herds through until spring if we are careful." "Sam, I cannot ask you to do that," Tom protested. "You are not asking, I am offering." "That is what neighbors do." Sarah Wheeler started crying, and Willa immediately went to her, putting an arm around the other woman's shoulders. "Come on. Let us get you and the children warm. Everything else we can sort out later." The Wheelers stayed with them for a week, the small house crowded but filled with warmth and companionship. Willa and Sarah cooked together, minded the children together, and formed a fast friendship. Samuel and Tom spent the days clearing the remains of the barn and planning a new one, to be built when spring came. When the Wheelers finally returned to their own property, Tom clasped Samuel's hand with real emotion. "I will not forget this, Sam. You and Willa, you saved us." "That is what family does," Samuel said, and he meant it. Family was not just blood. It was the people you chose, the people who stood beside you when things went wrong. February came with bitter cold and more snow. Willa realized she was pregnant one morning when she was sick into the wash basin for the third day in a row. She was nervous telling Samuel, worried about how he would react, but he swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "Willa, we are going to have a baby." "Assuming I survive this constant nausea," she said, but she was smiling too, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. The pregnancy was not easy. Willa was sick for months, barely able to keep food down, her face growing thin and pale. Samuel worried constantly, hovering over her until she finally snapped at him to stop treating her like she was made of glass. But even her irritability was endearing to him, proof that her spirit remained strong despite her body's struggles. By April, the sickness had passed, and Willa began to bloom. Her body rounded, her face regained its color, and she seemed to glow with health and happiness. She sewed tiny clothes with patient care, preparing for the baby who would arrive in early autumn. Samuel expanded the house that summer, adding another room that would serve as a nursery. Tom Wheeler helped him with the construction, repaying the debt from the winter with his labor and friendship. The women of the valley showed up one day with gifts, blankets and booties, and a beautiful cradle that Martha Green's late mother had made decades earlier. "Every baby born in this valley has slept in this cradle," Martha said, presenting it to Willa. "And now yours will too." Willa cried, overwhelmed by the generosity, by the sense of belonging she had never experienced before. These people, this place, had become her home in a way Boston never had. The baby came on a cool September evening in 1879, almost exactly a year after Willa had first arrived in Montezuma. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Martha Green, who served as the valley's midwife. Samuel paced outside for hours, listening to Willa's cries with his heart in his throat, helpless and terrified. Finally, just before dawn, he heard a new sound. a baby crying, strong and healthy and alive. Martha opened the door, her face exhausted but smiling. "You have a son, Sam, a big, healthy boy, and Willa is asking for you." Samuel entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Willa lay propped against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle, a squirming red-faced infant with a surprising amount of dark hair. "Samuel, come meet your son," Willa said softly. He crossed to the bed and looked down at the baby, feeling something enormous bloom in his chest. "He is perfect. Willa, he is absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" she asked. Samuel thought for a moment. "What about William, after you?" Willa shook her head. "I want to name him after someone who represents hope and new beginnings." "What was your father's name?" "James." "Then James it is. James Rayburn, welcome to the world." The first year of James's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful days. Samuel discovered reserves of patience he had not known he possessed, walking the floor with a colicky baby at 2 in the morning, changing soiled diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his terrible off-key voice. Willa nursed their son and watched her husband fall in love all over again, this time with their child. They were a family now, complete and whole, and the ranch prospered around them. The herd grew, the house expanded again, and their savings increased. Samuel hired a young man named Johnny to help with the daily work, which gave him more time to spend with Willa and James. On their second wedding anniversary, Samuel and Willa sat on the porch after putting James to bed, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Willa leaned against her husband's shoulder, her hand in his. "You ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Sending for a mail-order bride, taking a chance on a stranger?" Samuel turned to look at her, seeing the woman he loved more than life itself, the mother of his son, his partner in all things. "Regret? Willa, answering your letter was the best decision I ever made. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even with all my scars." The old fear still lingered sometimes, the worry that she was not enough. Samuel took her hand and pressed it to his heart. "Especially with your scars. They made you who you are, and who you are is extraordinary. You are strong and brave and kind. You are a wonderful mother and an amazing wife. You are my whole world, Willa. You and James, you are everything." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and they sat together in the gathering darkness, at peace with themselves and each other, and the life they had built from 2 desperate advertisements in a newspaper. 3 years later, Willa gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose. She had her mother's amber eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and she ruled the household from the moment she arrived. James, now 4 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, hovering over her cradle and bringing her treasures like smooth stones and wildflowers. The ranch continued to thrive. Samuel's reputation as a fair dealer and a skilled rancher spread throughout the valley, and he was able to buy additional land, expanding their holdings. Willa became known for her sewing skills, taking in orders from the women in Montezuma for fine dresses and intricate embroidery work, contributing to the family's income in her own right. They faced challenges, of course. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle that sickened and crops that failed. There were moments of fear when one of the children fell ill, nights of worry about money or the future. But they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense, and their love only deepened with each passing year. Samuel never forgot that moment when he first saw the scars on Willa's back, the terrible map of her suffering. But he also never forgot the strength it took for her to survive, to escape, to build a new life from nothing. Those scars were part of her story, but they did not define her. She was so much more than what had been done to her. On quiet nights when they lay in bed together, Samuel would sometimes trace those scars in the darkness, each touch a reminder that she was here, alive, loved, safe. And Willa would sigh and press closer to him, secure in the knowledge that she had found something she never thought possible: a home, a family, a love that was gentle and true and forever. Years passed, and their family grew again. Another son arrived when James was 7 and Rose was 3, a calm baby they named David, who seemed to observe the world with wise, patient eyes. The house expanded once more, now a sprawling ranch home that bore little resemblance to the simple cabin Samuel had built for himself years earlier. James grew into a serious, responsible boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ways of the ranch with the dedication of someone who knew this would be his inheritance someday. Rose was wild and fearless, riding horses before she could properly walk, climbing trees and exploring the mountains with the confidence of someone who had never known cruelty. David was the peacemaker, the one who settled arguments and brought harmony to the chaos of family life. Willa watched her children grow with wonder and gratitude. Sometimes she could hardly believe this was her life, that she was a mother to these beautiful, healthy children, that she woke up every morning beside a man who loved her unconditionally. The girl who had been beaten and broken in Boston felt like a different person, someone from a story rather than her own past. Samuel watched his wife bloom over the years, her confidence growing, the shadows in her eyes fading. She laughed more easily now, sang more often, moved through the world with the assurance of someone who knew she was valued. He was so proud of her, of everything she had overcome, of the life she had built through sheer determination and courage. When James turned 10, Samuel began teaching him to handle the business side of the ranch, showing him the account books and explaining how to negotiate prices at market. Willa taught Rose to sew, passing on skills that had once kept her alive in Boston, though she made sure her daughter understood this was a choice, not a necessity. David, at 7, was still finding his place, but he showed a surprising talent with animals, gentling even the most skittish horses with patience and calm words. The ranch was more than just a business now. It was a legacy, something Samuel and Willa were building not just for themselves but for their children and grandchildren. They employed several hands year-round, including Johnny, who had stayed on and become almost family himself. They helped their neighbors in times of trouble and were helped in return. They were part of the fabric of the valley, respected and valued. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Willa back to Montezuma, leaving the children in the capable care of Martha Green. They stayed in the hotel, the same place where Willa had first arrived, and Samuel took her to dinner at the restaurant, a luxury they rarely indulged in. Over roast beef and potatoes, Willa looked across the table at her husband and felt her heart swell with love. His face was more weathered now, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but he was still the man who had traced her scars and told her she was beautiful. Still the man who had offered her safety and freedom and love without conditions. "What are you thinking?" Samuel asked, seeing the expression on her face. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman alive," Willa said. "I am thinking about how different my life could have been if I had not found your advertisement, or if I had been too afraid to answer it. I am thinking about how much I love you, and how grateful I am for every single day we have had together." Samuel reached across the table and took her hand. "I am the lucky one, Willa. You took a chance on a lonely cowboy you had never met. You traveled halfway across the country on nothing but hope and desperation. You built this life with me, worked beside me, gave me children and love and purpose. I was just existing before you came. You made me start living." They returned to the ranch the next day, back to the chaos and joy of family life, but that night stayed with both of them. A reminder of what they had built, of what they meant to each other. The years continued their steady march. James grew into a young man, tall and strong like his father, responsible beyond his years. At 18, he began courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sweet girl named Anna who fit into their family as if she had always been there. They married when James was 20, and Samuel and Willa became grandparents less than a year later when Anna gave birth to a baby boy they named Samuel, after his grandfather. Rose, at 15, was still untamed, still wild, and Willa worried about her sometimes. But Samuel understood his daughter in ways Willa could not. He saw in Rose the same fierce independence that had driven Willa to escape Boston, to answer an advertisement from a stranger, to build a life on her own terms. Rose would find her path. He was certain of it, even if that path was unconventional. David, now 12, had decided he wanted to be a veterinarian, a new profession that was gaining respect in the West. He read every book he could find about animal medicine, practiced treating sick livestock on the ranch, and saved his earnings to eventually attend school. Samuel and Willa encouraged him, proud of his ambition and dedication. Samuel was 47 years old now, Willa 44, and they had built something extraordinary. The ranch was one of the most successful in the valley. Their children were healthy and happy, and their love had only grown stronger with time. They still made love regularly, still held hands on the porch at sunset, still found reasons to laugh together every single day. One evening in late summer, Samuel found Willa standing at the edge of the corral, watching the horses graze in the fading light. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come," Willa said softly. "About that frightened girl who stepped off the stagecoach 16 years ago, not knowing if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or the best decision. About the man who looked at her scars and called her beautiful." Samuel turned her in his arms so she faced him. "You were beautiful then, and you are beautiful now. You will always be beautiful to me, Willa, not despite your scars, but including them. They are part of your story, part of what made you the incredible woman you are." She kissed him, deep and long, and he responded with the passion of a man who was still desperately in love with his wife after 16 years of marriage. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "Take me to bed, Cowboy," Willa whispered, using the teasing name she had adopted years ago. Samuel laughed and swept her up in his arms, carrying her toward the house while she protested that she was too heavy, that he would hurt his back, even as she clung to him and laughed. They passed James and Anna sitting on the porch with baby Samuel, and their son rolled his eyes good-naturedly at his parents' antics. "Still acting like newlyweds," James called after them. "Mind your own business," Samuel called back, and Willa dissolved into giggles against his chest. They made love that night with the windows open, cool summer air flowing over their heated skin, and afterward they lay tangled together, talking quietly about everything and nothing. About Rose's latest adventure climbing to the top of Eagle Peak, about David's request to apprentice with the veterinarian in Denver, about James and Anna's plans to build their own house on the edge of the ranch property. "We did good, did we not?" Willa said, her head on Samuel's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "We did better than good," Samuel said, stroking her hair. "We built something real and lasting. A family, a home, a legacy. We gave our children something neither of us had. Security, love, freedom to choose their own paths." "I never thanked you properly," Willa said, "for taking a chance on a damaged woman with scars and secrets." Samuel tilted her face up so he could see her eyes in the moonlight streaming through the window. "You were never damaged, Willa. You were wounded, yes, but not broken. Never broken. And you do not need to thank me. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." She cried then, happy tears that he kissed away, and they held each other until they fell asleep, safe and warm and loved. The years continued as they always do. Rose, true to her wild nature, scandalized the valley by announcing at 17 that she was going to travel east to become a photographer, a profession dominated by men. Samuel and Willa supported her decision, giving her the money to buy equipment and book passage on the train. She wrote to them regularly, her letters filled with descriptions of the places she saw, the people she photographed, the life she was building on her own terms. David went to Denver to study veterinary medicine, returning 2 years later with a degree and a quiet wife named Margaret, who he had met at church. They settled in Montezuma, where David opened a practice that served the entire valley. Willa was thrilled to have another son so close, and she doted on Margaret, who reminded her a little of her younger self, cautious and wounded in ways that did not show on the outside. James and Anna had 3 more children, filling the ranch with grandchildren who called Samuel and Willa Grandpa and Grandma, and treated the ranch house as their second home. Samuel taught them to ride, to rope, to recognize the signs of weather change in the mountains. Willa taught them to cook and sew and to be kind to people who had less than they did. When Samuel turned 55 and Willa 52, they decided to officially turn the main operation of the ranch over to James, though they still worked daily and had no intention of truly retiring. James was more than ready, having learned everything his father could teach him, and Anna was a capable partner in all things. Samuel and Willa built a smaller house near the main ranch house, giving James and his growing family the space they needed while keeping themselves close. The new house was cozy, perfect for 2 people who had spent a lifetime learning to live together. They filled it with photographs of their children and grandchildren, with books and music, and the accumulated treasures of a life well lived. On quiet evenings, they still sat on the porch watching the sunset, still held hands like young lovers, still found reasons to make each other laugh. They had been married for 23 years, and their love showed no signs of fading. If anything, it had deepened, matured into something unshakable. One night, as they prepared for bed, Samuel watched Willa undress, seeing the familiar scars on her back that he had traced so many times over the years. She caught him looking and smiled. "They have faded," she said. "Time has been kind to me." "You have always been beautiful," Samuel said, coming to stand behind her. He traced the scars gently, the ritual as familiar as breathing. "These are just part of your story, Willa. The story of a woman who survived, who escaped, who built an incredible life. I am honored to be part of that story." She turned and kissed him, and they made love with the slow, practiced ease of 2 people who knew each other's bodies as well as their own. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Willa spoke quietly. "I have been thinking about the women still trapped like I was. In Boston and New York and all the big cities, working in factories, living in boarding houses, just surviving day to day. I want to help them, Samuel." "How?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I want to start a fund, to help women who want to come west but cannot afford the journey. To give them the same chance I had." She propped herself up on one elbow, her eyes shining with passion in the moonlight. "We have enough now, more than enough. We could help dozens of women, maybe more. Give them a way out, a fresh start." Samuel pulled her down for a kiss. "That is a beautiful idea, Willa. Let us do it." They started the fund the next month, working with churches in the eastern cities to identify women who wanted to come west but lacked the means. They paid for stage coach tickets, provided small amounts of money for basic supplies, and connected the women with ranchers and businessmen looking for wives or employees. Over the next 5 years, they helped 47 women make the journey west, and Willa corresponded with many of them, offering advice and encouragement. Not all the stories ended happily. Some women found the West too harsh, too lonely, and returned east. Some married men who were not as kind as Samuel, but many flourished, building lives and families and futures that would have been impossible in the crowded eastern cities. Willa considered every success a victory, a chance to give someone else what she had found. When Samuel turned 60 and Willa 57, they were surrounded by a large, thriving family. James and Anna had 5 children, David and Margaret had 3, and Rose had married a fellow photographer and had twins. The ranch had expanded to include several thousand acres, employing 20 men year-round, and the Rayburn name was respected throughout Colorado. But the true measure of their success was not the land or the cattle or the money in the bank. It was the love that filled their lives, the knowledge that they had built something meaningful, that they had helped not just each other but dozens of others find better lives. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were over 40 people there, counting children and grandchildren and close friends who had become family over the years. Tables were set up in the yard, loaded with food, and lanterns were hung from the trees as the sun set. Samuel stood and tapped his glass, calling for attention. When everyone quieted, he looked at Willa, who sat beside him looking beautiful in a dress Rose had sent from Philadelphia. Her hair more gray than dark now, but her amber eyes still bright and clear. 30 years ago, Samuel began, I placed an advertisement in a Boston newspaper, hoping to find a woman willing to take a chance on a lonely cowboy in Colorado. I did not know what to expect. I certainly did not imagine I would find the love of my life. He turned to Willa, taking her hand. You came to me carrying scars and secrets, wounded but not broken. You worked beside me, built this ranch with me, gave me children and grandchildren and a life richer than I ever imagined possible. You are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you until my last breath. Willa was crying, and so were half the people at the tables. She stood and wrapped her arms around Samuel, kissing him to the applause and cheers of their family. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. Thank you for seeing past my scars. Thank you for teaching me that love could be gentle. Thank you for this life. They danced that night under the stars, the same stars that had watched over them for 30 years, and their children and grandchildren danced around them. It was a celebration of love and family and perseverance, a testament to what 2 people could build when they chose each other every single day. Samuel and Willa lived another 15 years together, growing old with grace and dignity. They remained active on the ranch into their 70s, still offering advice to James, still spoiling their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, still sitting on the porch every evening watching the sunset. When Samuel died at 75, peacefully in his sleep, Willa grieved deeply but without regret. They had been married for 45 years, and every single one of those years had been a gift. She lived another 3 years after his death, surrounded by family, and when she passed at 74, it was with a smile on her face, her children holding her hands. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple headstones that bore their names and dates, and a single line that James had chosen. Together they built a legacy of love. The ranch continued for generations after them, passed down from parent to child, always kept in the Rayburn name. The story of Samuel and Willa became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The story of a mail-order bride with scars on her back, and the cowboy who traced them and said she was beautiful still. The story of two wounded people who found each other and built something extraordinary. A love story that endured beyond death, living on in the land they had worked, the family they had created, and the lives they had touched. It was a simple story, really. But then, the best love stories usually are.